The vast halls of the Imperial Command Center shimmered under the cold light of distant stars, their surfaces gleaming as though untouched by time. The space was a perfect reflection of the Empire itself, sterile, efficient, and unyielding. Commander Kai Jiao stood at attention in the middle of this vast expanse, his battle worn armor a stark contrast to the pristine surroundings. He was a man who had earned his stripes in the bloodied fields of war, and yet today, something felt different. A summons had arrived without warning, direct from high command, pulling him from his usual duties in the outer rim to the central hub of power. His fingers twitched involuntarily against his thigh, the only outward sign of his unease. Years of training had taught him to suppress any trace of emotion, but this was not just any meeting. The air felt charged, thick with anticipation. His body ached from years of combat, and his mind buzzed with the memories of countless battles fought. But today, there was an unsettling sense that he was about to be swept into something far beyond the scope of his experience. The sound of footsteps echoed through the chamber, sharp and deliberate, and Kai turned toward the source. Admiral Ven entered with his usual regal presence, his silvery eyes scanning the room with an icy precision. The Admiral's pale, weathered face barely betrayed any emotion, but there was a sharpness in his gaze that made Kai stand even straighter. Ven was a man who rarely spoke in anything but measured tones, and the rare praise he offered was often as cold and calculating as the Empire itself. Commander Kai Jiao, Ven's voice rang out, smooth and commanding. Your service record is impressive. 17 successful planetary campaigns, tactical genius in the Centauri offensive, distinguished service in the Outer Rim conflicts. You have served the Empire well. Kai remained silent, his eyes narrowing slightly as he watched the Admiral's face for any sign of what this meeting was truly about. He'd learned long ago that Ven's words often hid a deeper meaning, and Kai was skilled in reading between the lines. Ven paused, his lips curling into what might have been a smile, though it held no warmth. The Empire has taken notice of your skills, Commander, Ven continued, tapping a datapad that projected a hologram between them. And it has decided to offer you a unique opportunity. Kai's stomach tightened. He had heard whispers of these opportunities before partnership programs between Imperial warriors and alien allies. Many considered it an honor, a chance to forge new alliances for the Empire, but Kai had always felt uneasy about the implications. It sounded more like a political tool than a recognition of merit. Thank you, Admiral, but I serve where needed, Kai replied coolly, keeping his tone neutral despite the growing tension in his shoulders. Then silvery eyes gleamed. Indeed, but this is not a request, Commander. You will partner with one of our most valued allies. You are to report to the Hall of Oaths for the binding ceremony. Your partner arrives within the hour. Kai's breath caught in his chest. The Hall of Oaths, where warriors were bound to their partners in service to the Empire. The ceremony was brief, a formality that sealed the fates of two beings, forging them into a single unit. Kai had always worked alone. He trusted no one, not after what he had seen in the wars. Partnerships were risky, fraught with betrayal, and he wasn't sure he was ready to place his faith in anyone, let alone an alien. Ven's voice softened, but there was no compassion in it. Do not make this difficult, Commander. You've been selected for this mission because the Empire believes in your potential. Your new partner will complement your skills in ways you cannot yet imagine. The Hall of Oaths stretched before Kai like a cathedral made of starlight. Crystal pillars soared overhead, refracting the cis-twin suns into countless rainbow fragments, casting a kaleidoscope of color across the floor. The hall was silent, save for the distant hum of the Empire's countless fleets patrolling the farthest reaches of space. Kai's eyes flickered over the other warriors in attendance, some standing at attention, others looking uncertain, even fearful. None of them knew what to expect, but they all knew that what awaited them on the other side of the ceremony would change them forever. Kai's hand twitched at his side, the weight of his weapon a familiar comfort, but it did little to ease the discomfort in his chest. As he walked down the hall, his footsteps reverberated in the quiet space, each step drawing him closer to the unknown. The massive doors of the Hall of Oaths creaked open, revealing a figure that made Kai's breath catch in his throat. She was unlike any being he had ever seen before. Moving with the grace of liquid, each step deliberate yet flowing, she entered the hall with an air of absolute confidence. Her skin was a deep violet, smooth as silk and shimmering with an inner light that seemed to pulse with power. The formal diplomatic robes she wore clung to her form, emphasizing her perfect figure, but it was her eyes that held him completely. They were black, no, not black, but the color of the space between stars. Dark, infinite, and yet somehow warm, as if they held the secrets of the universe, both mysterious and inviting, Commander Kaijao. Her voice carried a musical lilt, smooth and almost teasing. I am Princess Meridiana of the Lurin sovereignty, but please, she smiled, revealing perfect white teeth. Call me Kai bowed stiffly, his mind racing. He had been prepared for a partnership, but this was unlike anything he had imagined. Your Highness, he said, the words feeling hollow on his tongue. Oh, none of that, she interrupted, stepping closer to him, her eyes dancing with amusement. We're partners now, aren't we? Unless the famous Earth Warrior is afraid of a little informality. I maintain appropriate protocols, Your Highness, Pai replied, fighting to keep his voice steady despite the unsettling energy radiating from her. She laughed. The sound like the chime of crystal. Protocol? Tell me, Commander, does protocol account for this without warning? She drew a slim blade from somewhere within her robes and lunged toward him, her movements a blur of speed and precision. Ty's combat instincts kicked in. He spun, catching her wrist in midair, his heart pounding in his chest. He held her there for a moment, their faces inches apart, her breath warm against his cheek. But even as he held her in place, he couldn't help but feel the electric tension between them. Not bad, she whispered, her voice low and teasing. But you telegraphed your counter move. Kai's grip tightened. This isn't a game, Princess. Isn't it? She purred, twisting free with impossible fluidity. Everything is a game, Commander? The sooner you learn that, the better we'll work together. Kai didn't respond immediately, his mind still racing from the unexpected attack. But as she circled him, her eyes never leaving his, something in the pit of his stomach stirred. There was something dangerous about her, something wild and yet undeniably intriguing. The binding ceremony was brief, a mere formality. An exchange of oaths, a sharing of blood, and the official sealing of their partnership. Throughout it all, May maintained that knowing smile, as though she was privy to some cosmic joke that Kai couldn't grasp. When the ceremony was over, she turned to him with a grin that suggested there was more to this partnership than met the eye. The next morning, Kai arrived at the Imperial Combat Center, his mind still reeling from the events of the day before. He had fought in countless battles, but this felt different. This was not just about strategy or physical prowess, it was about something far more complex. And he wasn't sure if he was ready for it. He moved through his usual warm-up routine with mechanical precision, the motions familiar and comforting. But as he finished, he felt her presence before he heard her voice. Your early commander, Mi's voice startled him from behind, playful yet sharp. He turned to see her standing there, now dressed in fitted combat gear that left little to the imagination. Her violet skin shimmered even in the harsh artificial lighting, and she stretched languidly, as though her body had never known the constraints of gravity. Training isn't about sport, Kai replied, his tone hardening. It's about preparation? Is that what you tell yourself? She teased, her eyes gleaming. No wonder Earth warriors are so tense. Before he could respond, she attacked quick and unpredictable, her movements like water, flowing around his defenses and striking from angles he never saw coming. Kai was forced to adjust on the fly, his own combat style of power and precision proving ineffective against her fluid, unpredictable technique. Too rigid, she taunted, ducking under one of his strikes. You're fighting the old way, Commander. The universe has changed. The basics win battles, Kai countered, finally managing to pin her arms in a lock. Meg grinned, her eyes sparkling. So sure of yourself. Let's see how long that lasts. The battle between them was fierce, both of them pushing each other to the limits. And by the end of the session, Kai was panting, drenched in sweat, his heart racing not just from the exertion, but from the undeniable pull he felt towards her. This was only the beginning, and already, he realized, this partnership was going to change everything. Kai's days began to blur together as he and May trained relentlessly. Each session was a battle of wills, Kai's disciplined, methodical style against Mi's wild, unpredictable approach. She was every bit as capable as the rumors had suggested, but what unsettled him most was her ability to read him. It wasn't just his fighting style she understood. She seemed to know his thoughts, his every hesitation, as though she could sense his deepest fears and desires. It had been days since the binding ceremony, and Kai still wasn't sure whether he should consider their relationship a partnership or a prison. Mao was both alluring and maddening. She had no respect for his personal space, often invading it with a teasing smile or a well-placed taunt, and yet there were moments when her demeanor softened, when her violet eyes seemed to reflect something deeper, a sorrow perhaps, or a hidden pain. These fleeting glimpses had left Kai restless, questioning not just their mission, but the very nature of the Empire's schemes. One evening, after a particularly grueling combat session, May led Kai through the narrow hallways of the Imperial Citadel, her footsteps silent as she moved with purpose. He followed her, his mind swirling with unanswered questions. "You've been quiet," May remarked, her voice breaking the silence. "I thought I was the one who liked to keep things interesting." Kai didn't answer right away. His mind was still focused on their last encounter, on how her moves had nearly caught him off guard. "I'm thinking," he said finally, his voice tense, "about everything. Like, what about the Empire?" he muttered. "About us. About this mission. We're bound together now, Meets. We're bound together now. Now, and yet, I don't know what's happening, what you want, what I'm supposed to do." Mai stopped and turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. "You think I don't have a plan?" Her tone was sharp, cutting through the tension. "I'm not some innocent diplomat sent here to play nice with your precious empire. I'm here because there are things happening in the galaxy that need to be addressed. Things that your superiors aren't telling you." Kai raised an eyebrow, taken aback. "What do you mean?" She hesitated for a moment, the weight of her words clearly heavy on her mind. The Empire isn't the only power in the galaxy. You've been taught to believe that Earth is the center of everything, that the Empire controls all, but you're wrong. There are factions, others that have been building strength for decades, and they have been waiting for an opportunity to strike. Kai's heart quickened. "What factions?" Mi's gaze darkened. "Not factions, a singular force. A secret organization that operates beyond the boundaries of the Empire, pulling strings, making alliances, orchestrating wars. They have a plan to overthrow the established order, to change the balance of power, and they've been using the Empire to further their goals." Kai felt his stomach twist. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what's at stake, she said, her voice low and urgent. You and I are caught in the middle of something bigger than either of us. The binding, the Empire's mission, it's all connected to their plot. And if we don't act now, everything we know will fall apart. Kai stared at her, disbelief clouding his mind. You think I can just trust you? After everything? After the Empire? After the wars? Do you think the Empire has been honest with you? I asked, her voice sharp. Do you think they've told you the whole truth about your missions, your people, your place in all of this? You've been trained to be a weapon, Kai. But I'm offering you a chance to be something more. Something better. Kai wanted to reject her words, to push her away, but the truth in her voice was undeniable, and deep down, he knew she was right. The galaxy was not as simple as it seemed, and the Empire's web of lies was beginning to unravel before him. I don't know if I can trust you, Kai said, his voice tight with emotion. I smiled, her expression softening. You don't have to trust me, but you need to trust yourself. And together we can stop the real enemy before it's too late. Weeks passed in a blur of training, strategy sessions, and covert meetings. The more Kai learned about the hidden factions threatening the Empire, the more uncertain he became about everything he had believed. He and me continued to spar, sometimes physically, sometimes with words, but each time their bond grew stronger, deeper. There was a connection between them, something neither of them fully understood, but neither of them was willing to ignore. Finally, they received their first mission together. It came down from the highest echelons of the Imperial Command. A planet on the edge of the galaxy, a world called Zephron, had fallen under the control of a rogue faction. The Empire had dispatched a fleet to neutralize the threat, but the situation was more complicated than it seemed. The Imperial forces had encountered fierce resistance, far beyond what was expected from the rogue faction. There was something about Zephron, something that didn't add up. Kai and me were tasked with infiltrating the planet, gathering intelligence, and determining the true nature of the rebellion. It was a dangerous mission, one that would take them deep behind enemy lines into the heart of the conflict. They were to use their combined skills to get in, gather intel, and get out without being detected. As they prepared for departure, Kai felt a knot in his stomach. This was the first time he and May would work as a team in the field, and he wasn't sure what to expect. May, however, was unfazed. Her confidence was unnerving, as if she had already seen the outcome in her mind and knew exactly how everything would unfold. You're nervous, she observed, noticing the tension in his posture as they boarded their transport. I'm always nervous before a mission, Kai replied, his voice steady but betraying a hint of uncertainty. She smiled, her eyes glinting with amusement. She smiled, her eyes glinting with amusement. Well, you're not the only one, but I'm used to this kind of work. We'll be fine. Kai wasn't so sure, but he didn't argue. The journey to Zephron was swift, and as they landed on the planet's barren surface, the landscape was eerily quiet. The atmosphere was thick with dust and smoke, remnants of past battles. Their mission was simple: find the rebel leader, gather information, and report back. But Kai knew better than to assume anything was simple when it came to war. As they made their way through the desolate streets of Zephron's capital city, their senses were on high alert. Every shadow seemed to hide danger, every whisper carried the potential for betrayal. Mi's eyes flickered from side to side, scanning for threats, while Kai kept his hand close to his weapon, ready for anything. We need to find the leader, he muttered. His voice low, Ma nodded. His voice low, Ma nodded. The leader is the key. Once we have him, we can pull the strings and learn everything we need. They moved through the ruined city with swift precision, blending into the environment, careful not to draw attention. They reached an abandoned building on the outskirts where the rebel leader was rumored to be hiding. Inside, it was dark and cold, the silence broken only by the sound of their footsteps. Mi stepped forward, her movements silent and fluid. She was in her element here, an expert in espionage and subterfuge, able to move unseen through even the most hostile environments. Kai, while no slouch in infiltration, found himself relying more and more on her intuition. They reached the heart of the building, where the rebel leader, awaited. Kai's hand tightened around his weapon. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he was ready for a confrontation. As the door slid open, a voice rang out from the shadows. "You've come for me." The rebel leader stepped into the dim light, revealing himself to be a tall, imposing figure, clad in dark armor. His eyes burned with a fierce intensity, and his presence alone was enough to make Kai's skin crawl. "I knew the Empire would send its best," the leader continued, his voice cold and filled with disdain. "But you're too late. The galaxy is changing. The Empire is dying," Mai smiled, her eyes flashing with challenge. "The galaxy isn't changing, Rebel. The Empire is only growing stronger. And you're just another obstacle in the way." As the confrontation with the rebel leader escalated, Kai couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The leader's words, his unwavering conviction, gnawed at him, planting seeds of doubt. Me, however, was relentless. She taunted the leader, her words sharp and biting, pushing him into a corner, forcing him to reveal his intentions. "You think you've won?" The leader spat. "But you're wrong. The true enemy isn't the rebels, it's the Empire itself. And soon the galaxy will see the truth." Before Kai could process what he had just heard, May sprang into action, her blade flashing in the dim light. The two clashed, their weapons ringing out with the sound of battle, and Kai realized too late that May had already made her decision. She was not working for the Empire. She was working against it. As the fight raged on, Kai's heart raced, torn between loyalty to the Empire and the growing understanding that May might be right about everything. The truth was far more complex than he had ever imagined. The war wasn't just between factions, it was a war for control of the galaxy, and the lines between good and evil were blurring faster than he could follow.